Bouncing back is like survival. It's like getting back something you've lost and surviving something coming through it. Whereas bouncing forward kind of has this potential, I'm not saying it always happens, but it has the potential to put you more in thriving mode rather than surviving mode. There's more focus on well-being in the workplace. You know, more money has been spent on this than ever. There are more resources available for people, more guidance, more support, and yet we're seeing more burnout than ever.
Hello, I'm Erin Shrimpton.
And I'm Dr. Gemma Lee Roberts.
And this is Psychology in the Wild, the podcast that explores what's wild about the day-to-day. Gemma, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome to Psychology in the Wild, our
I know,
podcast.
it's exciting. I know. I still can't believe you've actually got a podcast. So it's very exciting to hear that.
Every day that is a podcast day, I wake up and think, yay, I get to have podcast day with Gemma today.
I know,
so I'm excited.
And then we get a chat beforehand as well, because we have to have a little catch up beforehand to check in, see how we are.
Where we mainly talk about other stuff and then remember that we have to plan a podcast as well.
100%, that's how it goes.
So what has been wild with you this week?
Well, I have been really thinking about our trip to Athens and how wild that was in so many ways.
So many ways.
So many ways. So we had calamities, we had fun, we had little bits of stress, because it was a bit work as well going on. We had a little bit probably of parenting guilt of being away and keeping in touch with the kids and all of that jazz. I think it was wild. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely wild, but in a really good way. And I think that actually I really like this example because I think when we thought about this podcast, it was probably because when we usually catch up, we're always talking about all of the calamities that's going on for us, especially around parenting, I would say. But actually, it's really nice to focus in on something that was a bit wild, but actually in a really good way. And it was.
I agree.
Are you really glad you did it? Because I think
I'm so glad.
Right up to the day, I was still going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to Athens next week. And as you'll remember, so I was traveling from Dublin and there aren't direct flights to Athens every day from Dublin, which I wasn't aware of before I tried to book. So I had to fly through Manchester. And of course, I had that classic experience of sitting on the runway on a Ryanair flight for about 2 hours while my other flight to Athens was the time of the other flight was like approaching. And I was just thinking, I'm just going to miss this flight. How am I going to get there? And, so even right up to, by the way, sorry, I did get there, which is the end of that story.
Spoiler alert.
It involved, I don't think I've ever run so fast with a suitcase in my life. When I got to the gate, I was so sweaty. It was absolutely disgusting. And everybody around was looking at me going, what has that person been doing? Anyway, because I had to run. But if you're ever in Manchester Airport, just FYI, there's a fair walk between all of the terminals. But anyway, we got there and we had a lovely time, didn't we?
We did. And I think even booking the date was tricky. I don't know if you remember, but we were trying to work around. So we went to Athens to go and film a short course with another LinkedIn learning instructor. I'll get my words out. Tatiana. And she lives in the US, but is from Athens and it was going to be based there over summer. Or some weeks over summer. So we had a fixed set time that we had to be there because Tatiana had other work going on there as well. So we were kind of all trying to fit in our schedules and how to get there. So I remember you had something on the weekend before we were going. So we couldn't go earlier. Mm-hmm. The day we got back, so we landed back on Thursday. Friday morning, my children broke up for half term and we were driving to France. So I literally got back Thursday night. Friday morning, first thing, we were up in the car on Le Shuttle and on our way to France. So we literally had this really tiny window where we could make this happen, which is why you had to get a non-direct flight. Yes. And there were the calamities that came on from that. And I'd had to pack for our holiday before going. So I was packing when we were going to Athens the weekend before, and I did like a school event, a big ball thing as well the weekend before, which I was also trying to get prepared for. Anyway, that happened. And then I had to pack for Athens, which was a little bit of sightseeing and touristy stuff, which was amazing, by the way, the history, the learning.
So good.
Then we had to also think about, oh, hang on a sec, we're actually filming something, so I have to look presentable. So also then had to coordinate our outfits and
Which is
pack
always a problem
outfits.
for you, of course, Gemma.
It actually is a problem for me. I had to think through these things. And also I only took on carry-on luggage as well. So it's trying to figure out like what makeup do I really have to take to filming and what can I get away with and not and all that, you know, no one's really interested in that. But that stuff does come into this. And then had to have all the suitcases ready to go to France. So my stuff, the kids' stuff packed before I went, ready to go for that Friday morning when I got back. So I feel like Athens was wild before we even got there.
Yeah,
and then we managed to somehow arrange this filming. A lot of that's Tatiana did a lot of the legwork with getting a crew to come and film us.
Yeah,
then we've used my editor that I've used a little bit in the UK for editing. So we had to film. So it was, and the other thing, outside filming in front of the Acropolis. So we had the elements were not in our favour. It was absolutely roasting hot, wind. So our hair is blowing, squinting because it's so sunny, but we wanted the Acropolis in the background. And then, do you remember we were filming, and where we were filming in our hotel was on a rooftop, and it was agreed that we could use this space, and we didn't realise that it was going to be cleaned at some point because actual customers would be going in later on in the day. So we had people kind of walking past as we were filming, like in your eyesight. So if you imagine you're filming, looking at a camera, so behind the camera, people are coming in, opening, and I just kept thinking, please don't slam the door because we can't film this again. I haven't got long before we have to leave. So it was quite,
it was
quite full on. It was a test.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun.
It made me think as well about just the journey we've been on, you know, because we've both been LinkedIn learning instructors for a few years now, you longer than me, and you taught me the ropes. And if you told me 5 years ago, before I started any of this, that one day soon I'd be standing at the top of a Greek hotel filming in front of the Acropolis, I would have laughed because there's just, you know, in my head, no way I could have done something like that. So it just goes to show, doesn't it, what you can learn over the space of a few years and the resilience that you build to the kind of the uncertainty or the challenges that come your way. Because actually, although those, you know, cleaners trying to clean while you're filming and all of that, although those things kind of felt a little bit stressful on the day, actually within an hour or two, it had completely rolled off our back and we were off doing some more sightseeing and it was totally fine. So, but I just remember the first time I filmed, actually, well, it was during lockdown. So that was, I suppose, another challenge in and of itself. But definitely, I remember being very, very stressed about it and very kind of focused on, you know, everything that could go wrong. Whereas this time I was kind of more just go with the flow. And actually, that maybe segues quite nicely into some of the things that I was going to ask you about today, Gemma. Because we cannot record this podcast for too long before talking about resilience, because for those of you who don't know, Gemma's doctorate topic, research topic was resilience. And I think resilience is such an interesting topic for us all and often one that maybe is a bit misunderstood. Would I be right in thinking that?
Yes, 100%. I feel like resilience is a research topic I absolutely love in so many ways. You know, I spent years of my life delving into this concept and figuring out how it works. And that's, you know, also you're probably looking at even a decade when you look at working in that area as well. But I do think it's a topic that people kind of love or hate. And I feel like as we went into lockdown, you know, it feels like all those years ago now, but it was all those years ago, but it was a real buzzword. It was a hot topic. Everyone had to build their resilience. We had to be more resilient. We had to, and I feel like the term resilience has got a bit of a bad name now because it's been used as a way to make people feel like either they're not coping well enough. Oh, you're just not resilient, so you're just not coping with that. Or it's being used to throw lots of stuff at someone, whether, you know, in an organization or, you know, even just thinking about yourself, like kind of overestimating what we can cope with, and because we just need to be resilient, we just need to keep going. And to be honest, I think people, not everyone, but I think lots of people are a bit sick of it. I feel like it's been hijacked. And also it became resilience became a term for productivity.
Yes.
So you can be productive if you're more resilient. And I feel like that was not the point of resilience when it was first studied as a concept or talked about as a psychology concept. And so I feel like it's a bit of a tricky topic in that we kind of know what it is, but I think for lots of people, it's kind of left a bit of a bad taste in their mouth, which is, you know, from my perspective, a huge shame, because I think it's one of the key skills that all of us could do with, and it's something we should all be focusing on building in life, because ultimately what resilience is navigating challenges effectively and growing from that experience. And we're talking about psychological resilience here, so not physical. I'm talking about kind of mental resilience. So it's learning ways to get through challenges in a way that work for you as an individual. And the other thing I'll say about this is there's no right or wrong here. We're all individuals. But also using that experience to get stronger in the future, or to learn something, or to grow, or to change something. It's kind of using that experience as well. And when you break it down like that and think of it like that, I mean, who doesn't want more of that in their lives?
Totally. And is that how you would define it? Like, for your research, is that how you defined it? I think that's
so. It's navigating challenges or adversity and growing from the experience. But you know, that's a very interesting question, because there's actually no standard definition for resilience in the world of psychology research.
Which is partly why I think it's probably so misunderstood, because there's no one, you know, you don't think of the word resilience, and I think people think of bouncing back. But I loved, you know what, I had an amazing moment during the pandemic, thanks to you, because I remember you were being interviewed in a virtual event, and I can't remember exactly what it was, which I was watching at the time. And you introduced the idea of, instead of bouncing back, bouncing forward, which I really liked, because if you think about, like, if I think about, for example, everything that I went through during the pandemic, or that everybody around me went through the pandemic, I don't want to go back to before that, but I do want to move forward, and I won't ever be the person that I was. And if I think about any challenge, actually, it's not about going back. It's not about bouncing back to how I was. You know, even if you think about the language that is used around women's bodies after they have babies, bouncing back, you know, thanks, I don't want to bounce back because I've just grown another human. I will move forward in a different way. So it's similar, you know. Do you still use that terminology? Because I really liked that, and I can't remember where you said it came from, but
yeah, I do use that terminology, and I think it's really important. Because in my head, bouncing back is like survival. It's like getting back something you've lost and surviving something coming through it. Whereas bouncing forward kind of has this potential. I'm not saying it always happens, but it has the potential to put you more in thriving mode rather than surviving mode, because you are improving your health or well-being or satisfaction or relationships or learning more. Like there's this kind of growth element in it, which I think goes hand in hand with this idea of thriving. And the analogy I always use, which is probably quite boring if anyone's ever heard me talk about this before, but I should come up with a new one, really. I was thinking just then, I was like, oh, maybe I'll relate this to our filming experience. But let me give you the German analogy I use first.
Yeah.
It's the idea of like training for a marathon. So a marathon's 26.2 miles, which I have to check periodically because sometimes I get those numbers wrong. But it is 26.2 miles. And I don't know how many kilometres. And imagine you're training. So I've done a half marathon before, many, many, many moons ago. We'll never do it again. But what I learned from the training is you have a plan. So the plan will say, today you need to run 3 miles, and then you might do a long run on the weekend, say a 5 mile. Then you go back again. You might do some sprints where you might, but the point is you're always kind of, then you keep going back to doing this longer stint. So you go back, so then you'll try and work up to 6 miles, and then you might stay there for, and you try and work up to 7 miles. And the point I always make, and how this relates to resilience, is imagine you really hurt your ankle. You've got to the 10-mile mark you've managed to do at some point in your training plan. So you're trying to get to 26.2. You've got to the 10-mile mark and you pick up some kind of injury. I don't know, you hurt your ankle, sprain it or something like that. If we were looking at this bouncing back scenario, then that would mean when you start your training again, you're happy to get back to that 10-mile mark and that's it. Because you're bouncing back to where you were. You're happy with that. You don't need to go any further forward. You don't need to grow anymore. You don't need to learn anymore. That's kind of like the level you're at. Whereas if we're looking at bouncing forward, you might think, okay, I've sprained my ankle. How did I do that? Was it just unfortunate? Did I just trip and, I was tired when I was running, or it's just a mistake, or there was something I didn't see? Or is it my running technique isn't great, or I need to change my trainers, or actually I did that because I had an injury somewhere else that I hadn't addressed and it caused me to run in a certain way and do that. So if we're looking at this bouncing forward, you'd be figuring out, okay, why did that happen? Like, is it where I was running? Is it how I was running? And what can I do to change that? So, okay, I've learned something from that. Is there anything I can do to help me get further next time? Maybe it's, I don't know, a different pair of trainers. Maybe it's different kind of training. Maybe it's physiotherapy, for example. But you're looking at, okay, what can I learn from that experience that was really challenging? And then how can I use that experience to help me get further in the future? So if it's a marathon, how can I use that experience and be like, okay, I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to grow from that. And I'm going to get to that 26-mile mark at some point.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I mean about bouncing forward. And I think that relates to, mindset, how we view the world, how we think about the world.
Totally, yeah.
When we're going through those challenges, I'm not saying it's always desirable or pleasant, or I'm not saying, even as a resilience researcher, I don't start my day every morning thinking, what challenges can I face today? I'm just so excited to face a new challenge. Like, most challenges that come my way are very, very unwelcome.
I know.
But they come my way nonetheless.
Yeah.
But it's about looking at that and thinking, okay, and it's not even necessarily right at the moment you're working through it, because sometimes we do go into survival mode, and that is a totally adequate part of the resilience journey and totally normal. But it's kind of like later, okay, how can I learn from that or grow from that or change something because of that? It can be quite a complex concept, really, but it's my job to make it really easy. It's my job to be able to make this stuff really relatable in everyday life, because otherwise what's the point of doing the research if we can't actually do anything with it?
And I think that's such a good point that you made about the mindset, because in a way, building resilience is so much about how you think about the challenges that you've had, rather than even how well you got through the challenge, because we all get through challenges in one way or another. But actually, if you think about what you've learned from it and use that, even if, on the face of it, you might not feel like you've gone through the challenge well, but there's still something to learn. And apply for the future. And I really like that idea of, growth through those kinds of experiences, because, and it doesn't necessarily mean growth in a way that means that you're going to be a better performer, because again, and we'll probably get onto this, it doesn't necessarily, you already said about resilience not necessarily being all about performance, but, growth can be, actually, for me anyway, when it comes to something like resilience, I always think about how actually the growth sometimes for me was, what I really need to be careful of now more is making sure I rest more. And that revelation and that realization, having been through a challenge in some way, shape or form, actually has led me to grow in a way that looks after myself more, or tunes into what I want from my life or what I need in life more. And for me, that's growth. That doesn't necessarily, it might not actually lead to me achieving more. But for me, that's good, because it's all about living a full life, isn't it? So are there proactive ways to build resilience?
There are.
Because in a way, in my head, I'm kind of thinking you build resilience having been through a challenge. But can you build resilience by presenting yourself with challenges deliberately?
You can't manufacture challenges because it's not real. Your brain knows it's not real. You're just trying to trick yourself, really.
Yes.
But what you can do is put yourself in situations that you find challenging or uncomfortable. So think about developing a skill like public speaking. So many people do not enjoy the experience of public speaking or presenting in front of others. But actually, you can build your resilience in those situations, because it will feel like adversity. If it's something you hate, it can it can really create a fear response in you.
Yeah.
So it could even be that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Yes, totally. Yeah, yeah.
So you can slowly start pushing your boundaries of doing that and making that happen. So I think the first thing is kind of acknowledging that you need challenges.
Yeah.
And maybe even looking at those challenges as a way to build resilience. So I'm thinking about, I had a bit of a challenging morning this morning. And even thinking about the fact, I'm not sitting there going, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm just building my resilience as I go. Just woke up this morning, building my resilience. I'm not doing that. I'm not skipping around the house doing that. And the same, when my kids face challenges, I'm not like, oh, this is amazing.
I know.
Small challenges, I'm like, oh, that's good for them. But bigger challenges, I'm like, oh no, do they really have to deal with this? But the point is, you do have a choice in the moment where you can think, okay, am I going to wallow in this, or am I going to find a way to fix this? Am I going to learn something from this? You can actually change how you look at those situations.
Yeah.
And there's also another point to this as well, which I think we often confuse resilience with grit. So grit,
Yes.
it's one of my bugbears, is passion and perseverance.
Yes.
Grit is pushing through.
Yeah.
It is getting to an end goal no matter what. And I would say there's a place for that in our
There is
lives.
a place for that, yeah.
For sure. There was, I think about my doctorate. I had to push. I think about writing the book. Had to push through. No choice. Had a deadline. Had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
However, do I want to live my life like that every day? And I see grit as, imagine resilience is massive. All these different things you can do to build your resilience. I see grit as a tiny part of that. Sometimes you need to push through. Sometimes you've got a challenge ahead of you. It feels hard and you need to just push through, keep your head down, keep going. That's your kind of grit coming through. But other times you might need to give up, or you might need to rest. Think about athletes when they're training. Mm-hmm. Rest is as important as endurance in training. So sometimes you might need to rest. Sometimes you might need to accept that you can't change the situation, or accept that you can't go back in time and make it different. Yeah. All you can do is kind of work with what you've got now. So there's all these different elements to resilience. And I think sometimes we think of it, it's been hijacked a bit by this kind of grit performance, keep pushing through, they need to perform better.
And as you said earlier as well, I think it's definitely been misused in an organizational context. A lot of my work over the years has been in organizational culture, and often I get asked, how can we make this culture more resilient? How can we have more resilient people in this culture? And I know what really I'm being asked there is, how can I drive performance? How can I have a workforce that are ultimately robots and don't have feelings and don't have to have sick days and don't have to, and don't get me wrong, there are, there's a lot of complex issues within big organizations. Sometimes there are issues with people not performing. And so I'm not saying that across the board, it's just organizations who have unrealistic expectations. But I think if organizations continue to look at people as resources who need to be productive all the time, then there's no outcome there that actually is going to be in line with what real people will be. And because often, similar to you, when I go into organizations, a lot of what I'm kind of trying to advocate is not pushing through, not performing to your highest level at all times, because I know that if you try and create that kind of a culture, people will be burning out. So my messaging is often find a way to buddy up with people to support each other's well-being, find a way to rest more, find a way to, because that actually in itself is a resilience. So I'm just wondering about when you get asked to go into organizations to talk about resilience, are those the messages that you feel comfortable saying, and also how does it land?
100%. And before COVID, when I was going to talk about resilience, I'd work with teams of people, and I was asked to, my first question is always why, because I would always be asked, we need to make this organization or this team more resilient. My first question is why. And it will always, pre-COVID, it always came down to productivity, performance, output. And it was really hard because, as an organizational psychologist, my main concern is people within the organization. And how they're experiencing work, how we can help them to thrive. And actually, using resilience as a tool for productivity and performance isn't always the answer. It can be sometimes. Like, resilience can help you with those things, for sure. For sure it can. But what I have found since COVID, there's such a bigger focus on well-being in organizations. It's much, that they were challenging conversations to have before, because I'd have to kind of push back sometimes and just be clear of, what the organization was actually trying to get out of doing by making people more resilient. And I had to have loads of difficult conversations around that, exactly as you probably have had to have around culture. And it made my work really hard, in all honesty. But I feel like
it's easy for you to just go, yep, I'm just going to go in and deliver a few sessions on resilience as per your brief. But actually, we, rightly or wrongly, Gemma, we feel like we have a duty of care to the people who we're trying to support, and that wouldn't feel right, I guess. So
it doesn't. And and I have to be really careful as well that organizations aren't training people or coaching people to be more resilient so they can throw more rubbish at them, basically. So that's another thing we have to think about. Like, oh, you've been on resilience training, you should be able to deal with this. Or, oh, do you know what, we'll just put you on a resilience course and this will make, like, I have to make sure that, things that need addressing within the culture are actually being addressed as well. And of course, I can't always influence that from the outside in. I have to feel comfortable with. And actually, I don't actually work with tons and tons of organisations anymore, as you know. It's I have to really fit with the culture. I have to really believe in what they're doing.
Well, and part of the reason, I think it's quite interesting, and I think it may be a bit of a time of life thing for both of us, where the type of work that both of us do, like separately but adjacent to one another, is kind of helping people within organisations and then within a wider kind of cultural context. And actually, that is quite a hard thing to do when you also have the demands that we have at home, 2 kids. We both have 2 kids, and to be really fully immersed in a situation where, you're really trying to help people through difficult situations in work, or you're really trying to help them build their resilience, or you're trying to build a resilient culture, whatever that may actually end up being, you really need to be fully immersed in it yourself. And I think one of the reasons that I'm doing less of that work at the moment is just because it does take its toll, if I'm honest. It does take its toll, because it's really challenging. It's really, really challenging to find a way to support people and make sure that they are well and doing really good work, as well as an organization, in the context of an organization, basically ultimately wanting to deliver shareholder value. And those two things don't always mix.
And it is, and you're exactly right. I feel like it does take its toll on us as well. I feel grateful in that I can have more of those conversations about the well-being side of these things now, because there's so much more of a focus on that. However, as we've kind of talked about many times before, there's more focus on well-being in the workplace. More money has been spent on this than ever. There are more resources available for people, more guidance, more support, and yet we're seeing more burnout than ever.
I know.
So it's a really challenging position to be in. And I think I have to, at times like that, when I think about that, I have to kind of take a step back and think, okay, how can I help individuals? Hence, the Building Resilience course that's there available. Hence, I'm like, right, keep it simple, make it applicable, make these things so easy, these habits, that people can just implement them every day, or, really simple things to think about. So I guess I'm thinking about if someone said to me, okay, what's going to help me to be more resilient today or this week, or
what can I do
the
today?
answer is there are a multitude of things, and our resilience levels will go up and down all the time. The other thing I'll say, there's no end goal. You don't get to being resilient, tick it off, done.
What?
Because I know
I'm not going to wake up one day and be like a god and just be completely resilient to everything. No.
I mean, if I could sort that out for everyone, we'd be living in a great world. Unfortunately, even myself, I have to work on this. I know this stuff inside out. I have to work on it all the time. And that's because life is changing all the time, and also think about, you might have one big, like sometimes you react to something and you think, later you think, why did I react like that? It wasn't
Yeah.
really that bad. Now, there could
Mm-hmm.
be a whole multitude of things going on there, but partly
Mm-hmm.
it can be because you might also have 15 other little things
Yeah.
going on that exact same day. And that was the last thing. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if that's a UK saying, it probably is, but it's the little tiny thing that just made everything else crumble down. Or
Mm-hmm.
you could have one major thing going on in your life. You might have
Yeah.
just had a health diagnosis, or I don't know, someone you care about might have something going on for them. So you have to understand that your resilience, how well you cope with challenges and love that, will change over time. And it's not all in your control. But what you can control is building skills, for two things: building skills to help you deal with that. So
Yeah.
things like reframing challenges, like, could this be a learning experience potentially, is one
Mm-hmm.
thing. Another big tip actually, and one of the most overlooked aspects of resilience, or things that can help you to be more resilient, is actually support. And what's good, because we
Yeah.
often think resilience is all about us, it's all within us. I have to be resilient, I have to figure this out.
Totally.
But actually, what I know from my research is that your support around you can be a game changer. And it could be colleagues, it could be family members, it could be friends, it could be a mentor, a coach, a boss. Don't think it all lies with you as an individual. Yes,
Yeah.
you're in control of your behavior and how you view the world and your perspective, for sure. You can change those things. But actually, if you're feeling like your resilience is quite low, the first thing you can do is think about what's going on in your support network.
Yes.
Because there might be changes you need to make. That maybe you need a bit more support.
And I actually, just as you're talking there, do you know what? I've sort of had a bit of a revelation around just women and the expectations on women and society, and how there's so many things that women still do without even thinking about it subconsciously. You know, and the story we're probably telling ourselves is, well, we just need to be resilient to this because it's just what we're supposed to be doing and what we're here for. Where actually, as you say, no, we do all need more support. Actually, I mean, we could have I think we should probably put a pin in that one and have a whole another podcast all about that, because
100%.
keeping resilient as a parent, and because even as you were talking there, I was thinking very much about the 15 things going on at once, and then the final part of the day where I'm trying to get my 6-year-old to brush his teeth, and oh my God, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? And I'll be kind of patting myself on the back for having quite a productive day, or even actually funny yesterday, because I kind of knew we were going to be talking about resilience today, and yesterday I was thinking, I'm actually feeling quite resilient today, and I had that thought, and I was delighted with myself having the thought. And then about 2 hours later, I was thinking, I am not feeling resilient at all. I'm feeling completely and utterly flummoxed by everything, every little thing that's going on around me here. And so I think it's really helpful that what you've just said is just to be aware of the fact that it fluctuates. And even within the space of a day, you can...
Oh my God.
And I suppose there's different aspects. You can feel resilient to challenges in one aspect of your life, but not resilient to challenges in other aspects of your life. And so, this is what we're talking about. The chaos and the wild chaos of everyday life is some aspects of your life are under control, whatever that may be. Nothing is ever really under control, but you know what I mean? Some aspects you kind of feel like, yeah, I kind of got that. And then meanwhile, and so you'll feel a bit like you've kind of, you're able for more challenges on that front, but then there might be another aspect where they're just, it's all kicking off. So I suppose there's probably an element of self-compassion with it as well.
Oh, 100%. Kindness, self-compassion. Think about, as we say all the time, would you talk to your best friend like that? Like how we talk to ourselves, or what we expect of ourselves, is often far higher or far more than we expect of others, or far harsher than how we talk to other people. And I think that's a great tip for building resilience and building that awareness as well. I think knowing that there is no end goal. It's not like learning to play the piano and you not I've ever learned to play the piano, so that's a really bad example, but I assume you learn how to play a song and then you can keep playing that song. That's not how it works with kind of psychological skills like resilience. It's
Although maybe we should be placing more emphasis on them. And I know in school they are teaching it, which is amazing. I mean, I always think our kids are going to be actually kind of unbearable because they're going to all be so well adjusted and psychologically resilient.
I hope so.
While our generation was completely messed up. No, I'm only joking. But they are teaching in school, which is brilliant. But actually, we should be, not that I'm saying, we should be having, my party piece is my resilience. And I'm going to stand up and talk about how resilient I've been today. But, really finding a way to tune into it. And actually, maybe this brings us nicely full circle, because in a way, one of the ways that you do that is to focus on some of the positive things that happen in your day or that happen in your life. Like we did at the beginning, we talked about our trip to Athens, where, there were lots of challenges associated with it and it was all wild on either side of it. And when we got there, actually, it was brilliant. And, so it's really nice to kind of take a step back and notice, actually, there are really good things that happen. Even when you think, I'm totally overwhelmed right now, I can't even manage another minor challenge, and actually you realize, oh, I just did. So
100%. And the thing is, we've been talking about, and this is what the whole podcast is about, wildness in every day. And that's the kind of resilience we've been talking about. And of course, there are really, really majorly challenging things that people go through. And that's in some respects, that's a different kettle of fish. That's a whole different process. We're talking, rather than focusing on resilience in those situations, I would argue we need to be looking at kind of how we process trauma, for example.
Yes.
And maybe resilience is a small part of that, but it will be a part of that. It's not the whole thing. And I think, sometimes we take the pressure off ourselves a bit as well. And it's okay. Like you're saying the other day, 1 minute you think, oh my God, I feel really resilient here. And then, 2 hours later, you don't. That's okay. That's just part of being a human and part of our experience of life. So it's a complex one. And I'm sure there'll be bits of, the topic and what we've talked about today that we'll cover again at some point as well. And
well, actually, it's funny. Yeah, because I think that really is the essence of our podcast, which is, resilience in the everyday and how do we use it. And, yes, you're dead right. We're not here really to talk about, although obviously it may come up, but we're not here really to talk about the very, very serious challenges that people face. And obviously that is that is a lot in people's everyday life. But we are also, it's interesting that, everybody you talk to, everybody has these little minor challenges every single day, and actually even navigating those can be tricky. So we want to find ways and talk about ways to do that. So any further last tips?
So support, think about your support system and really delve into that when you need to. Appreciate challenges when you can. I know we're not sitting there waiting for them, but, reframe how you think about challenges. Can they be learning experiences? Don't always focus on grit. Think about things like rest, accepting the situation as well.
That's my favorite one.
Equally as important. I guess they're my main tips to kind of get people started with being, and also just maybe building this awareness. And, as with most of psychology and personal psychology, it all starts with self-awareness. That's, the more aware we can become about ourselves, how we process information, how we view the world, our emotions. And it's not about even changing those things necessarily. It's just understanding ourselves. So like when to be compassionate with yourself, when to be kind with yourself, when to push yourself, and I think we can only learn those things about ourselves. That's the other thing with resilience. You need different things at different times.
Oh, I know.
And the only way you're going to know how to do that is first by testing what works for you at different times. But also getting to really getting to know yourself and what you need. And we can do a whole episode on self-awareness, but even just kind of, you saying, I felt resilient then and then I didn't feel resilient. And, even just moments like that, we're checking in with ourselves is really helpful, because if we know where we are, the next step then is thinking, okay, if I'm feeling not resilient at the moment, I know that mindfulness really works for me. I know that being in nature really works for me. I know that rest really works for me, or connect, phone call with a friend I haven't spoken to in a while, or even a text message. There might be things that, like kind of like tools in your toolkit that just kind of sit there for when you need them, or your toolbox, and then you just pull the ones out you think, actually, I'm feeling a bit low on the resilience level. I'm going to check in with someone, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to, I don't know. It will be very different. Or sometimes I'd be like, do you know what? I'm just going to push through this and get through the other end as well on this one.
Yeah, sometimes you do need to do that, in fairness, but
You do.
it is also about recognizing when to stop or when to do one of those nicer things that'll help you build that resilience up. Can I tell you about a story that I had this week as well? That was that actually is one of the things that I find helps my resilience. So I think so. Well, just the backdrop of the story is that I was waiting for a scan in a hospital, and like everybody it was quite a big waiting line. And every single person, like you see on the tube or like you see on the train, every single person was sat there with their phone, like scrolling. And including me, I was looking at stuff on my phone and I was probably trying to be productive about something or other. I can't remember what it was, but like this is part of the problem with phones. And I think we should have a whole conversation about this another time as well. But part of the problem with phones now and our addiction to phones is not just that we're addicted to Instagram and, addicted to kind of the doom scroll. It's also because there's so many things, like everything to do with the school is on the phone, all the WhatsApp messages that have to be replied to, they're all on the phone, paying for parking, like literally everything is on the phone. So I was probably going through whatever list I had to do with that. But then a porter came down and he was bringing a patient into the room next to me, and he was all silent, but he just called out, "What are you all doing? Why are you all sitting there looking at your phone? You could be sitting beside your new partner and you wouldn't know it because you're sitting there looking at your phone." And he was a bit of crack, and I really kind of appreciated it, and actually made us all feel a little bit awkward. It was definitely an awkward moment, but it completely broke the ice. And actually then I did end up having a really nice chat with the lady beside me, who was great fun. I, learned a bit about her family and a bit about what she was in for, and we were having a bit of banter about that. And, it's a bit of an obvious thing, but what I was kind of thinking about in terms of that was, actually having a good chat with a stranger. Isn't it such an uplifting thing? No, it's not for every time. There are definitely some moments where I'm going, oh, just like get the head down, put the sunglasses on, and just get to whatever I'm doing. It's not for all the time, but having a good chat with a stranger. And we know as well that it is, from a resilience perspective, from a wellbeing perspective, that actually having a lovely chat with somebody and a bit of an interaction with somebody literally calms the vagus nerve. It regulates the nervous system, probably gives you a bit of a laugh. And actually that's one of the things that I must remember, and maybe I could impart as a bit of advice this week if anybody is needing it, if they're going through a particularly wild week. See if you can have a chat with a stranger, and see you never know, you might meet your partner.
You may well do, and it just brings a moment of joy, and it's like a little moment of connection. And also the thing that I love about that story as well is just a little bit of a laugh as well. Don't we just need some of that in life?
I know.
We have to laugh at stuff.
Oh, stop. I mean, isn't that part of the reason we're doing this podcast? So that, not that we're...
laugh at ourselves.
So we could laugh at ourselves and just have a bit of a laugh together, because, work can be, let's face it, work can be really hard work, and we all need to find a way, I believe. It's maybe one of my kind of secondary aims in my working life is because it's that I really believe we should be all having a bit more fun at work and a bit more crack at work, because it really can get a bit serious, and what's the point in all of that?
Yeah. But I mean, there's enough seriousness. We have to find a little bit of lightness somewhere and a little bit of joy.
Absolutely. And I think that's what this guy was doing brilliantly. Like, I just wonder how many times he does that a day, and I just love the fact that he did that, because, he didn't have to do that. He could just as happily keep his head down and not do anything, but he chose to kind of have a bit of fun with us. So I just thought that was really nice. Little unexpected moment. So maybe that's my unexpected moment of the week.
That's what we're going to end on, the unexpected moment of the week. Well, Erin, it's been obviously another wild week, and let's catch up next week and talk about what's wild then.
Let's do it. Looking forward to it. And thank you so much for all of your wisdom on resilience, Gemma. As you said, I think it'll be a continued theme throughout this podcast, so don't think you're off the hook. We're going to continue to ask lots of questions about it.
Amazing.
Take care.